Hello, everyone, and welcome. Malcolm Muggeridge was a caustic British journalist and an agnostic who, as an old man, became a believer in God, a follower of Jesus Christ, and a prolific Christian apologist. Reading one of his books one day, I came across a quote that gripped me, and it became one of my favorites. Between the fantasies of the ego and the truth of love, between the darkness of the will and the light of the imagination, there will always be a need for a bridge and a prophetic voice calling on us to cross it. Our Western world is preoccupied with its many fantasies and its own will, with temporal things like power and wealth. They have a secular mentality. They say that there is no God, that you can believe in one if you want to, but don't bring him into the public square. Don't bring him into our public discussions and conversations. Now, these believers in God who live in this secular world should be preoccupied with God and with eternal realities like truth, love, and the enrichment of our souls. And we want others to embrace and enjoy this God who promises to fulfill the desires of our heart. So Muggeridge's quote really resonates with me, and I hope it does with you. I want to speak on why the prophetic voice is so important and so needed in our day. Prophetic voices are many and all around us. They exist in every field, the political world, the business and financial world, the entertainment world, and in the field of medicine and education, and in the religious world. I happen to be a voice coming from the religious world, having served the living God all my life, preaching and teaching from the Bible, and having followed Jesus. Whenever the prophetic voice speaks, the minority of people will listen, but the majority will not. There will always be a resistance to the prophetic voice, and that resistance will sometimes be fatal. People who have much to lose will be resistant to the prophetic voice. They will reject it, they will ridicule it, they will mock it, they will subvert it, they will attack it, and they will even try to silence that voice. Why is that? Because the prophetic voice speaks truth. And that truth makes a lot of sense, but it also makes a lot of people uncomfortable. Their message resonates with the deepest part of the soul. And many people really want the deepest part of their soul to be in harmony with the Creator who brought them into existence and gave them life. The God who gave them a consciousness and a conscience by which we live out our lives to the glory of God. We speak God's truth into people's lives, into a secular society that enjoys living a lie. In fact, it revels in doing so. It enjoys celebrating, promoting, and even imposing their way of thinking and living on everyone else. We also speak God's truth into a sleeping church, an imperfect church that has lost its grip on proclaiming God's truth to a wayward culture and lost its grip on living God's truth God's way. Look at the Jordan Peterson phenomenon the last few years. Why did millions of people around the globe tune into listening to him online and go to his hour-long lectures in city after city wherever he went, when we are being told that most people have a 20-minute attention span at best? We pastors have been told ad nauseum the last 10, 20 years to keep our sermons short, no more than 20 minutes, to keep them on the light side, nothing heavy or controversial, because we don't want to offend anyone. But then Jordan Peterson comes along being controversial, being offensive, and people are actually paying to hear him lecture for a good hour with no musical group backing him up, getting the crowd revved up to hear him. My favorite apologist, Ravi Zacharias, suddenly passed away at the age of 74 from cancer only 2 weeks ago. I knew him from the age of 19 when I first heard him speak at a summer Bible camp, where he mesmerized the gathered crowd with truth from the Word of God. Have you ever heard him speak in person? He needed a full hour just to get warmed up. But of course, I'm exaggerating. When truth is being spoken, it is spoken eloquently and passionately. You can listen to it for days on end. Have you ever had the experience of listening to a speaker for 10 minutes and felt it was like an hour, and then listening to another speaker speak for an hour and it only felt like 10 minutes? There are people binge watching Jordan Peterson and Ravi Zacharias because they are hearing life-giving truth that they are deeply craving. I'm so proud of the many Canadians like Jordan Peterson, and I would even add Mark Stein, who also works in the secular world, and Ravi in the academia and the religious world, who hailed from India, but whose Western roots were first formed here in Canada. But I've digressed. I want to go back to the question I raised earlier. Why? Why have millions of people worldwide from many different cultures and nationalities flocked to hear Jordan Peterson? I'll tell you why. He is a prophetic voice who speaks the truth, helping people to make sense of their lives and the world we live in by talking about bringing order into their chaotic world, first personally and then publicly. His book, The 12 Rules for Life, has sold millions of copies in many, many languages. Truth tellers suffer no foolishness. They don't put up with nonsense. They expose it all, and they supply the corrective measures that need to be taken. Jordan is, and Ravi was, of this ilk. My only problem with Jordan is that the idea of God and all the virtues that come with believing in the idea of God takes precedence over the reality of God, the actual person of God, whom we can relate to on a personal level. We don't simply believe in the idea of God and all the godly virtues outlined in the Scriptures, but we believe in the very personhood of God, who revealed himself in the person of Jesus Christ and empowered us by the indwelling Spirit of God, the Spirit of holiness. So Jordan is a prophetic voice in this world who falls short of talking about a personal, loving, and holy God whom we are accountable to in the day of judgment. And there are many of us that simply want to go the extra mile and compel the world to embrace the one true living God with all their heart, the God who created them and longs to be reconciled to them. Ravi was one of them. Prophets are truth tellers, and they speak into societies that nurture and celebrate deception, that nurture and promote the fear of man rather than fear of the living God. These truth-telling prophetic voices fear not what man can do to them. They are bold and courageous in the face of threats against them. They know that their lives can be snuffed out in a moment. But they also know that it is better to live and die with the truth in your heart and on your lips than to live your whole life having deceived your own heart and believed a lie. David, in Psalm 51, verse 6, speaking to God, said this, "You, O God, desire truth in the innermost being, and in the hidden part you will make me know wisdom." And here's the point King David was making over 3 millennia ago. Not only do we as human beings crave the message of truth, but God himself wants us to be true to ourselves. He desires truth in our innermost beings. As Jesus said, when you know the truth will what? The truth will set you free. The soul wants to be free. Lies and all kinds of other sins put us in bondage. We are captives to our sin nature. Souls are stumbling in the dark and not living in the light. Many people are in that condition right now. Maybe you are. David was in the dark because of his adultery and murder, which he tried to live with but couldn't. He was going to explode because of the guilt of his sin, which he was harboring deep inside. And it wasn't until he admitted and confessed his wrongdoings to God that he was set free. He was being true to God and true to himself. Whenever we suppress the truth, it won't go well with us. Whenever society tries to suppress the truth, it won't go well with that society. They will always fail. Think of all the authoritarian dictatorships that have tried and failed. It never lasts. If you don't believe me or think I'm exaggerating, I've posted a link in the description box below about how YouTube has banned a video by David Wood, who happens to be a Christian apologist, and he was reporting on the Christian persecution that was taking place in one part of the world. And YouTube flagged him for violating their policy on, get this, promoting violence, when all he was doing was reporting on what was happening. Dear friends, the suppression of the Christian voice, the prophetic voice, has begun in earnest. The soul that God created in his image craves the truth, and it will only be satisfied by hearing the truth and embracing it wholeheartedly. Going back to Muggeridge's quote with which I began, between the fantasies of the ego and the truth of love, between the darkness of the will and the light of the imagination, there will always be a need for a bridge and a prophetic voice calling on us to cross it. Jesus Christ is the bridge that we are pointing to, the bridge that will take us from fantasy to reality, from death to life, from darkness to light, from this world to the next. We are the prophetic voices, you and I. We speak truth into people's lives. We speak God's truth into a secular society that enjoys living a lie, and also into an imperfect church that sometimes loses its grasp of the truth. This message, in many ways, has been a tribute to all the prophetic voices out there in the midst of great opposition who are making the truth known at a very great cost. If we lose the voice of the prophet speaking truth, then we have lost the voice of God speaking into our lives. But God is not going to let that happen. He has always raised up prophetic voices to declare his truth to the nations, and he is not going to stop now. In my next video, I hope to elaborate even further. The Lord be with you and guide you into all truth.